Oh man, am I excited to talk about this today. The Wild Robot. What a phenomenal movie that was. I have seen it 3 times already. It was that good. And this is coming from somebody who has seen quite a few movies over the past 5 to 10 years or so and has not been very thrilled with a whole lot of stuff out there. In fact, there's probably only like 3 movies I've seen in the past 10 years that I would buy after seeing it. But The Wild Robot is one of them. And there are many reasons why. So we're going to get into that. But just know this video is going to have spoilers in it. So if you do not want to have the movie spoiled and you haven't seen it already, there are going to be spoilers in here. So tune out, go watch the movie, and then come back to this video later if you don't want to have any spoilers. And before we get into it, this here is Firmly Unbound. Firmly Unbound is an expression of exploration and freedom in work, play, and faith. And I believe faith is the strongest aspect of that really sets the foundation for what it means to live firmly unbound, where I believe you become firmly unbound from your life of sin when you surrender your life to Christ and grow your connection with God. So that is what Firmly Unbound is. If you identify with that, I have Firmly Unbound t-shirts on the Firmly Unbound website, so you can check those out there. And now we're going to get into The Wild Robot and what made this movie so dang spectacular and why it touched so many souls. But I believe it's in a way that a lot of people are missing, which is just blowing my mind. But at the same time, I understand why people are missing it. So we're going to get into all that. I've seen the movie 3 times. Like I said, I've seen it with my mom, seen it with my girlfriend, and I went and saw it again with my girlfriend and took notes for you. So really trying to depict this the best that I can from what I saw. But then also want to point out that when I went and saw this movie, I think this is important to talk about because one, I'm not seeing anybody online talk about this. And two, when I saw it with my mom and my girlfriend, neither one of them picked up on this messaging that I saw so clearly, or at least they didn't pick up on it right away. And I was the one that kind of sparked the idea for them to see it in this light. And this is where we're going to get into the spoilers here, but we're going to go through the movie and I'm going to show you why not only is The Wild Robot a beautiful depiction of motherhood and just parenthood in general, but also of the life of Jesus Christ. The Wild Robot, yes, is a beautiful depiction of the life of Jesus Christ, and we are going to get into all of the reasons why that is and how that is displayed throughout the film. I don't know if that was the creators of the film intention or not. Doesn't really matter because whether it was or not, it's there, and that is what really touched and moved me so much with this film. And we're going to show all the different aspects of this film that depict the life of Jesus Christ through an animated series or an animated movie. So let's get into it. So first of all, with the start of The Wild Robot, you have the robot that falls to Earth. And I'm going to skip a lot of the details that don't really have to do with the wild robot depicting the life of Jesus. This is not going to be like, this movie's not a one-for-one depiction of the life of Jesus, but there are a lot of connections to be made here. So the first one that we see is the wild robot enters into the wilderness and immediately is being rejected by all of the animals. So let's take a look at that.
Hello. Did you perhaps order a rosin helper robot? Is that a no?
Okay, so pretty dang funny, but the imagery here, the animals are kind of like people, and then obviously the robot is going to be like a Christ figure. So the robot comes into the world and is just looking to help. That is its only goal, its only objective. It doesn't even have like an inherently bad nature in it. It's obviously a robot, so it has programming, and it's like there's no harm that could potentially or possibly be programmed into this robot. And yet still the animals are afraid of it and want it to go away. That's exactly what happened to Jesus. As soon as Jesus professed to be God, the Pharisees and every like religious scholar in the time wanted to get rid of Jesus because they saw him as a threat and saw him as problematic, and then just thought that he was committing straight blasphemy to say that he was the Son of God. So this is the exact same experience that Jesus had when he came to earth and then displayed or professed that he is the Son of God. And again, if you haven't seen this or just haven't been able to really picture this in your head, please go watch The Chosen because it really shows what this most likely looked like in a way that just text is really hard to get that same sort of feeling and emotion behind what that was likely like for somebody who had no harm whatsoever to be, you know, treated in such a way. So that's the first connection that we see. Now, as we continue to go through the movie here, I have my notes here, so I'm going to look down at these as we go. Um, the next thing that happens is the robot understands that it can't, or realizes that it cannot understand these animals. So it has to come to the same level of understanding with the animals so that it can communicate with the animals. So it sits down and it basically goes into a learning mode so it can learn the language of all these animals. And I think this here is, this also is showing a Christ-like nature where Christ, because he is also God, is able to understand all humans equally, live that human life, and not only, come down to earth and become one of us, just like the robot is kind of like becoming one of these animals. The movie even shows how the robot is able to adapt and mimic animal like movements. God came down to earth as a human, exactly in the form that we are, in a way that he could communicate in the form that we are, to be the light to the world. So that is another imagery that we see here with the robot. And as it continues down, I filmed a lot of different clips in this movie, but I'm gonna try to be selective with which ones I put on screen here. I also hope that this doesn't get copyrighted. I really honestly don't know the rules about, posting video clips of a movie like this online. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this. But then we get to a point where the robot falls on this nest. So it's being rejected by all these different things. It encounters a bear. And again, I'm not going to show all these clips, but it encounters a bear, and the bear basically tries to chase it out of the forest and is saying, "Get out of here." The robot tumbles down a mountain and lands on a bird nest, and it discovers this egg. And as it discovers this egg, the egg gets stolen essentially by this fox, and then the fox runs off with the egg and tries to take the egg. And as soon as the robot actually catches the fox lands on a porcupine. The porcupine injects all these you know spikes or whatever it's called on a porcupine into the fox. And instead of the robot like getting mad at the fox or throwing the fox or whatever, this is what the robot does. So I kind of missed the beginning of that clip, but you could see the fear in the fox's eyes that it thinks it's about to die. And then the robot just plucks all those spikes out of the fox and lets it go. So we're seeing this image of Christ develop in this robot already, even though it hasn't even taken on any like human like characteristics, which are going to come in this movie. And it's already showing a level of compassion that humans don't naturally exhibit, which I think this is where we're starting to already get this picture of the robot being a Christ-like figure, because Christ came down to earth and was able to do things that humans just could not do, not only on like a miracles basis of being able to like heal the sick and heal the blind and different things like that, but also being able to display love and empathy and um what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my gosh. Forgiveness in a way that humans just don't naturally exhibit to like the greatest degree. And so we're seeing that here with the robot. And what started to work in my mind really early on and definitely plays out throughout the film is a robot is such a good way to show Christ, because a robot obviously can be programmed to certain things. And I think this is where we can get into even a little bit of debate about maybe what might come in the future. But a robot is programmed to do certain things. So if it's programmed to not do anything bad, which still I guess is going to be controlled by whoever the programmer is, it's able to act in a way that is beyond human like, where it's just not going to be able to exert evil, hopefully, is what we think. Let's assume there's no artificial intelligence worked into this robot. And Christ was able to do the same thing. Christ was almost like a robot in the sense that he was able to display such a love, such a sacrificial nature and forgiveness to a degree that no human could. So I think this is a really cool depiction of that. Now, as we go on through the film, the robot has this egg, the egg hatches, and now the robot is stuck with this bird or this little goose following it around, and it gets assigned a task, which is what the robot was there to fulfill, was a task that it has been given, but it has to be given a task by somebody. And I think there's some beautiful lines in here about parenthood, so I do want to throw these in here real quick. The robot doesn't want or doesn't know what it's supposed to do with this goose thing, and then one of the other animals in nature is going to give it a task.
I do not have the programming to be a mother.
No one does. We just make it up.
Without an assignment.
Obviously, some beautiful lines there about motherhood, and I think just parenthood in general. I didn't let it rub me the wrong way or anything. I don't have kids of my own, but I do plan to have kids in the future, and I think this is just parenthood in general. I don't think that it's any more or less difficult. Maybe it is more difficult for a mother. I can't say, but I think it's just parenthood in general. Like nobody gets a rule book or a guide exactly for how to be a parent, and every child requires different things. So I just thought that was beautiful. I wanted to make sure that was in there because this movie also does really show the sides of parenthood that I think are connecting with a lot of people. But it goes so much deeper than just parenthood because this robot is able to fulfill things beyond what just a parent could fulfill. So wanted to throw that in there because I just thought that was beautiful. But let's keep moving on, and then we're gonna get into the next part where they're now sitting, and this fox that comes along with the robot to offer assistance to the robot to help be a parent to this goose is going to tell a story. And this story is literally just showing, I mean, it's like a figurative or metaphorical story for how the robot heard this animal and came down to be its mother or be its savior, essentially. And again, like, I hope we can see the connection here to how this is a Christ-like figure. Let's watch.
And what this little gosling needed was a mother. So he looked up at the stars and asked the brightest one if he could send him one of their extras. Funny thing is, there's this beautiful robot that happened to be sitting on the edge of that star. And she hears him. Okay, now.
So love that imagery there. I think each one of us can kind of identify with being this little gosling, and then Jesus was the figure that came down and saw us each individually, and God sees each one of us individually and loves us unconditionally. And I hope that if you haven't experienced that love, that you will truly seek God. Something that I've done over the past 3 months or so that has just been completely transformative in my life is I have made it a point to really actively seek God as intentionally as I can. And for me, that's been things like watching theological debates and watching content online that is trying to depict and explain the Bible, and then also watching The Chosen, all of which have brought me so much closer to God. And I can tangibly feel his presence and his love in a way that I haven't felt since I was a small child. So, really love that. Now we get into the point in the movie where this little gosling is going to come across other geese and realize that he is not exactly who he thought he was, or he didn't know that there were other animals out there that looked like him. And then he's going to do something where he gets made fun of and bullied, and then the robot comes to save him, and he refers to the robot as his mother, the same way a lot of us refer to, or believers refer to, God as our father and get mocked and ridiculed. It happens here in the movie as well. Let's watch.
He's not our kind.
He's a 98% match to yours.
I'm not. Let's just go, Mom. Wait, you think that thing is your mother? Yes. No, but I don't know. That thing killed your mother. Everyone knows that. Oh, thanks for talking.
Man, that scene gets me because when I was in 6th grade, so coming into middle school, I was, the bottom of the barrel 6th grader in a 6th through 8th grade school. And I was on fire for God at that time. And I led a prayer group at my school that I facilitated myself. And we sat in the corner of one of the hallways and prayed in the mornings. And I got made fun of so much. And the Bible even says that we will get persecuted and made fun of for our faith. And that is exactly kind of what we see going on here is these geese are just making fun of him and making him out to be a fool because he believes this thing to be its parental figure. Even though this thing means no harm, they just don't understand what this thing is. The way that a lot of the world just doesn't understand who Jesus was. They don't get it. They don't understand God. They don't understand Jesus. They have not taken the time to really dig in and try to understand it. And it's just what happens when you are a believer in God and you have had those experiences where you know what God is, you know who God is, and you know who Jesus was. You have undeniable conviction and belief that that is true. and then you are just cast out and spit out by society if you come out and talk about it. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. So man, it just touched my soul to watch that and look at it through that lens. Now, let's get into the next part here. Next clip is going to be a conversation between Roz the robot and Bright Bill the goose. And it's going to be a realization for this goose that one, this robot is not its actual parent, and two, that this robot does not have emotions or feelings. And that is something that I think is so interesting as well. Two things really here. I mean, one, I'm sure if you're a believer, you have experienced this. I know I certainly have, where you've had your faith challenged, and maybe it's even just a mental challenge. This is what I've experienced, where it's like, does God even, is God real? Does God understand me? How could God possibly put me through this thing if he understands my pain and my struggles? Like, there's no way. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is this is going to start a transformation in the robot, where the robot is going to go from this, it's already started to display some human-like characteristics with emotion and contemplation and different things like that, but it's really going to start to now reprogram itself to become more human-like. And this is an interesting debate here, where I think this also just shows that this gets really deep, because Jesus came down to earth and was a perfect being, lived a perfect life, did no wrong and no harm to anybody, lived a flawless life, something no human could possibly do, which is part of what shows the miracle of Christ, and part of what shows the legitimacy of Christ is how historically it is documented that Jesus lived this perfect life. Now, no human on earth is able to do that, which is part of what is, in my mind, a realization that Jesus is who he says he was, and was the Son of God, because he was able to live in a way that no man could and no man ever will be able to live. Now, this robot is going to start taking on human-like characteristics, which is where the, robotic space and technology space is just separate from humans. The things that separate humans from AI and from other technologies is technology doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have a conscience. And that's what makes us different. You can't just create a consciousness. Only God can create a soul. But this makes for interesting debate. What if technology could be programmed in a way that it actually can create a soul? Is that possible? If that is possible, what would that mean for the existence of God? Now, I personally do not believe that that will ever be possible. I don't think there's going to be any technological advancements that will allow technology to be able to create a true, genuine soul, or take a soul from a living body and apply it or program it into something else. I don't think that's ever going to be possible, because I believe that God is real, and God is the only figure in the universe that can create a soul. But we're going to see this robot here kind of take on a soul throughout the rest of the film, and then continue on becoming even more of a Christ-like figure. Because I know this video is getting a little long, but we really haven't even gotten started with how truly Christ-like this robot is going to become. So watch this here.
Satisfactorily today, and if you keep practicing, I still won't belong.
I understand.
You don't understand anything. You don't feel anything. You're not my mom.
Man, just powerful. I don't know about you, but I have came to circumstances in my life where I have completely rejected God. And that is what this is a very obvious depiction of to me in this clip right here. And then some things happen in the film that we're going to skip over, but basically Roz goes and finds another robot to try to seek help. So Roz goes and finds the wreck site where it came from when it hit this spot on Earth, and finds another robot like it, gets it up and programmed and running, and then tries to ask it for help. And this robot basically figures out that Roz, the other robot, has changed its programming to extend beyond just being like this computer thing, and it now is taking on like emotional characteristics. And this robot tells Roz that it doesn't belong here, it needs to go back, that it's defective. And Roz basically doesn't listen to that and goes back to try to help the goose, or to help Bright Bill. Let's call them by their names, but goes to help Bright Bill. Then we come to one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie, where one of my favorite lines from this movie is in, where the robot is going to help Bright Bill learn to fly. And this is so important because Bright Bill has to be able to leave the island so it doesn't die in the winter. And to do that, he needs to be able to fly. So let's watch this here, and then let's see if you can pick out this line that I think is just so beautifully written, and just love this line.
You can just leave. Wow. And after all we've done for him, are you gonna let him do that?
No, your life is not negotiable. If you are willing to do this, you can fly away, and we can both go to where we belong.
And I'm even coming to realizations as I'm watching this back again. So the line in there that was just so beautiful was, your life is not negotiable. That's exactly what Jesus said. I don't know why I just almost stuttered there. That is exactly what Jesus said when he came down to earth and sacrificed his life, is he said that your souls are not negotiable. I'm going to die for your sins so that you can live in eternity with God. But here's the kicker, and I just realized this even. The robot, despite all of its power, all of its wisdom, its perfection, cannot make the decision for Bright Bill to want to take the steps to learn to fly. Just like God cannot make you, we have free will, and God cannot make you accept God and accept Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. You have to do it on your own. We have free will, and it is your choice if you are going to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior or not. God cannot force you to do it, or God limits his power in his ways of giving us free will, where we have to make that choice for ourselves. And oh my gosh, that just, even just watching it back right now again, just hit my soul so hard. I've got chills multiple times. That's why I think this movie is just so beautiful, and it's so impactful, and people aren't, like, we're so disconnected from God that people aren't even making these connections, and they're missing out on the reality that we get to experience this level of emotion in our own lives in a way that far expands even beyond just human connections, in this connection with God. It is such a beautiful gift that Jesus gave us, to surrender his entire life and die on the cross for our sins so that we can live in connection with him in eternity and experience the love and relationship with God. And it just breaks my heart truly that people don't get to experience this. And this is why I think, I understand that when people try to evangelize on the streets and stuff like that, it can rub people the wrong way. But gosh, what a more compassionate thing can you do for another human being than try to bring them to the understanding of the love of Jesus Christ? I really don't know how you can love another human being more than try to let them know, hey, your life and your soul is non-negotiable. And because I love you, I have an obligation to tell you about Jesus. I have an obligation to let you know that Jesus is real, and there is a experience that you are missing out on that is transformative to every cell within your body. I mean, it is that deep. And we can't hold that back. But gosh, just so much imagery in here that's just so beautiful. And just when you make that, when I made that connection, I mean, it just, oh, I could watch this movie over and over and over again. It is just so beautiful. So from there, then the robot teaches this goose, Bright Bill, how to fly. I'm going to save those clips for the movie because, man, they are just tear-jerking clips. They are beautiful. And the robot teaches this goose, Bright Bill, how to fly. And it flies off with the flock and is safe. Then we see this robot really become a Christ-like figure beyond what we've seen so far when the winter storm hits and the robot decided to stay back to make sure that Bright Bill made it safe. And during this winter storm, we see this robot do something that no other creature on earth would go out and do, just like Jesus Christ came down to earth and did something that no other living human or creature could do. So let's take a look at that here. Actually, before we get to the winter clip, there's another clip in here that I'm not going to put in, but that I forgot. The geese, as they're migrating, they find their way to the facilities on Earth where these robots are actually made. They settle down there for a second, and Bright Bill goes around and sees that there's these other robots that look just like Roz and doesn't appear to see them as a threat. So they're hiding in these cornfields. All the geese are trying not to be spotted by these robots. And Bright Bill approaches one thinking that they're friendly and they're not harmful, and then they try to attack all the geese. So this here actually is a very beautiful depiction of how there's all these other humans that have walked the earth that look just like Jesus looked, but they are not Jesus. Jesus was unique and special in the fact that he was the living God, and he is not like any other human that has ever walked the earth. The same way that this Roz robot is, even though appears to look the same as all the other robots that have been made, is not the same thing. So that was another thing that I'm not going to put in here, but that is another depiction of how Roz, this robot, is a Christ-like figure. But now let's get to the Winter Storm clip.
Are others in danger? I know you all have instincts that keep you alive, but sometimes to survive, we must become more than we were programmed to be.
So cool the way that this robot is able to sacrifice everything to go and bring all of these animals, or just like in the world, the way that Jesus came to bring all these people together. And this is where, again, The Chosen shows this so clearly and in such a brilliant way, where it's hard for us to understand if we're just reading the Bible, the historical context of what's going on. So when Jesus and his disciples went out and brought all of these groups of people together, you don't really see, and or at least I didn't really see until watching something like The Chosen, how much these groups of people hated each other. Like literally hated each other. They would not dare be seen in public around these other groups of people. And yet Jesus brought them all together, the same way that this robot brings all of these animals together. So just beautiful. Then from there, a few things happen in the movie, but it kind of gets up to this climax where Roz puts the transmitter back in her head to go back to where she came from, because she's now completed her task, and goes up and is taken by these other robots that come from, where the robots are created essentially, and then has its whole entire brain, in a sense, or its programming all stripped out. So this is now symbolizing the death of the robot, just like the death of Jesus. But something miraculous happens, and it's the same miraculous thing that happened with Jesus. Let's watch.
I love you.
I love you too.
What? What?
Oh, don't need that. I have everything I need. All power to exterior.
There it is, the story of Jesus Christ coming to life, where this robot dies and then is resurrected and transcends anything that is possible within the world as we know it, where it's able to even rip out its core that powers it. And we learn earlier in the movie that the robot explains that this is needed for its survival, rips it out and uses its body to protect Bright Bill. And just such a beautiful depiction of the life of Jesus. It then goes on in the movie, the robot saves all the animals in the forest and then tells all the animals that these robots are just going to keep coming after her, and is going to be a threat to all these animals as these robots try to get control of Roz back, and that Roz needs to leave. So Roz leaves, and just like Jesus leaves and transcends into heaven after coming and making himself visible and apparent to, hundreds of people. I wish I was more of a biblical scholar, but I'm getting there. I don't remember how many people he revealed himself to after his resurrection, but it's well documented that he did, and that did historically happen. So robot does the same thing and then goes back to where it came from, and eventually gets reunited with Bright Bill at the end of the movie, and that's how the movie ends. So just such a beautiful picture of the life of Jesus through this animated film. I hope that if you didn't pick up on this, that this really made that clear and evident, and I'm excited about this movie. It's a movie I'm excited to show my kids in the future. It's just such a great tear-jerking film, and rightfully so. I feel no shame whatsoever in saying that I cried in this movie, and could, if I really tapped into my spiritual side watching this movie, I could cry nearly every time because it is so impactful to view this story as essentially the life of Jesus, or at least the robot being a Christ-like figure. It really makes it real in my life. And so love that. I'm going to end it with one last clip that I forgot to put in here that I also thought was really cool, that shows the workings of God that just transcend what we can even understand sometimes, where there's a leader of the flock that comes to the robot and says, "Hey, I've been watching you try to train Bright Bill to fly, and this is what you need to do." And then the robot is feeling bad because it killed Bright Bill's family and is now the reason why Bright Bill can't fly, because it doesn't have a family to teach him how to fly. But the head of the flock, Longneck, I think is his name, explains that Bright Bill is a runt, and likely if his family did survive, he would not have, because he's a runt and he just would have not survived. And Roz is the only reason that Bright Bill was able to get to where he is now and is going to be able to get to where he's going, which would not have happened if it wasn't for Roz. So just a beautiful depiction here to close this out on how God just works in mysterious ways, and even some of the most traumatic things that could possibly happen in life often turn around and end up working out for good. So I want to end it on that. Hopefully y'all appreciate this video. If you do, make sure to like and subscribe, and there's going to be more content coming like this. And then finally, if you haven't already, go check out FIRMLYUNBOUND.com. I have t-shirts on there if you identify with what it means to live firmly unbound, which firmly unbound is an expression of exploration and freedom in work, play, and faith. And like I explained, the faith aspect is the main pillar of that, where we become firmly unbound from our life of sin when we surrender our life to Jesus. So go check that out. Those are very limited on FIRMLYUNBOUND.com. I appreciate y'all watching, and until next time, live firmly unbound.
Yeah, I understand. No, you don't. You see any other geese here your size? The accident that killed your family saved you. I never thought of it that way. Funny how life works.